The lies Netflix told on Tiger King, Part 1. Why was Carol in the Tiger King? Let's get right into it and just think about that for a second. Here's a quick spoiler alert. If you haven't watched the series just yet, go watch it first and then watch this video. Or if you don't care about the spoilers and you want to watch the series with a different perspective, watch this video first. If you've already watched this series, you know that there's basically one entire episode that seems to heavily hint at Carol feeding her second husband, Don, to a tiger. Why on earth would Carol Baskin agree to go on a documentary that was basically all about Joe Exotic, someone who has continually been threatening her and making her life miserable? Let's show some of the evidence here. Why would someone go on a show that puts someone they hate in a mostly positive light? Is it for the money? Well, no, because if Joe Exotic is right about Big Cat Rescue, then Carol makes plenty of money. We also know that she has a Facebook page that millions of people follow and a YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers. We also know that Carol had plenty of money from Don's estate, but that's another issue we'll dive into later. So we know that Carol already is pretty much rich along with a more than healthy cash flow, so we can rule out money as a motivation. She'd have to either absolutely love money to agree to go on Tiger King, or she's absolutely broke and needed that Netflix money. Neither appears to be the case here, so Netflix had to sell her some other way in order for her to agree to go on the show. And here's what the most likely truth is. Carol said that Netflix had told her they were making a documentary about big cats that was going to be a lot like Blackfish. That was the documentary that exposed the truth on SeaWorld. Obviously, Tiger King's focal point wasn't about the bad practices in the industry of big cats. It was pretty much centered on Joe Exotic. We definitely buy Carol's claim here because it makes the most sense. Why else would she agree to be on a show that puts her in a terrible light with all that they had shown with her ex-husband's disappearance, as well as all the crazy things Joe Exotic says against her? Now, where do we even begin with Joe Exotic's claims about Carol? We know that basically Carol's relationship began way back with Joe. She found out about Joe's traveling circus and she didn't think he was treating his animals right. So she started a campaign aimed at stopping his business. And that's where this big fight started. Joe decided to create a company called Big Cat Rescue Entertainment Group. The only thing is that his company was essentially named after Carol's company, Big Cat Rescue Corporation. What was the main reason that he decided to do this?
Where did you get the name? Where'd you get the idea for the name?
Big Cat Rescue Entertainment. I mean, we're the biggest in the United States of rescuing big cats, and we entertain people.
Joe says his reasons, but John Renke says the real reason.
He did that as a ploy to help his ratings on the internet.
That makes much more sense, right? Long story short, Carol and her current husband Howard took Joe to court and eventually won. They were able to get $1 million judgment against Joe Exotic. But what had Joe Exotic been doing? Joe had transferred assets over to his mom, Shirley. Basically everything from his cash to his bills to his property. Once the judgment was made against him, instead of hiding what he can, he even goes as far as showing himself blowing up his own things on video. Long story short, Carol and Howard are able to show that Joe's mom committed fraud, and Joe's mom, Shirley, admitted to it. However, Joe then claims that Carol and Howard started to go specifically after his mom and tried to bankrupt her. Except that never happened. In the same document, they agreed specifically not to go after Joe's mom. But of course, Joe, with his personality, wants to play it up like he's a big victim, and he dragged his parents into it. Let's think this through. Why would Carol and Howard want to go after someone without money? Let's just be real here. That house that Joe's parents are in doesn't exactly look expensive. And even if they hate Joe, would they hate their mom too? But let's flip it real quickly. Even if they did decide to go after Joe's parents' assets, how would they be able to do that? They wouldn't be able to. They already agreed to not go after her for money for her involvement in the fraud. But Netflix producers still decided to allow Joe to make his false claims of Carol and Howard bankrupting his mom and going after her house. He claims that she had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend herself, except her money was money from Joe's operations, and the only person that had to file for bankruptcy was Joe himself. But of course, this wasn't Joe Exotic's biggest lie that Netflix producers left out. He had a much bigger one. What about Joe's claims about Carol doing the same exact thing as himself? Netflix never really fully showed her daily operations with her cats. The scene shown here on Tiger King apparently is a once-a-year event called the Walkabout. The way Netflix shows it, it makes it seem like the event is a daily event and that many people are looking at the cats every day. Apparently, according to Carol, the rest of the year isn't like what's shown on Tiger King. Visitors are taken around in groups of no more than 20 on guided tours. That's where they learn the stories of the cats and the issues they face in captivity and in the wild. Joe has also repeatedly said that Carol has people working for her for free, and Doc Antle contended that Carol's has, quote, an army of people working for her for free as well. Carol is also on film saying this:
I don't pay anybody to do animal care because people will do that for free.
You would think that Carol doesn't pay anyone but herself or Howard, but that's not true. There are other salary employees. With Joe's repeated claims that Carol makes a lot of money from Big Cat Rescue, you would think that Netflix would want to show how Carol runs her operation. But the producers don't dive deeper into how Big Cat Rescue is run as a nonprofit. Nonprofits have to be open with their books, and Big Cat Rescue isn't any different. In fact, on their own website, they're completely transparent with their finances. Another contention that Joe has is that Carol and Howard kept their cats in cages just like he did. Joe showed a picture of one of Carol's cats drinking out of a cage. But that was extremely misleading because cats from Big Cat Rescue only go into that section of the cage to eat. According to Big Cat Rescue's website, their smallest enclosure is the size of a small house, around 1,200 square feet. Their largest enclosure is over 2 acres. They have a detailed page showing exactly how their cats live and what their plans are housing the cats in the future. Netflix could have easily portrayed how operations at Big Cat Rescue actually are, but they chose to focus on the more sensational parts of the story. That's understandable, given that Netflix is focused on entertainment and getting more people to watch because of a crazy story. They wanted to create more mystery by leaving out details of Carol's operations to make her look like a hypocrite. If they had shown how operations were done at Big Cat Rescue, well, Carol would have easily seemed much more credible on Tiger King. Another thing that Netflix continued to lead on was Joe's singing. Who can forget Joe's rendition of Here Kitty Kitty and I Saw a Tiger? Because, to be honest, the production quality on those tracks were good. Actually great, if we're being honest. If you played us that song and told us this was a new hit country song, we'd absolutely believe you. It seems like Joe Exotic actually has an amazing voice, but surprise, the person singing was not Joe Exotic at all. And Netflix producers somehow never mentioned this fact. Of course, it's possible that the producers never asked Joe who was singing and just assumed Joe had such a great voice. But they spent so much time filming footage of him, and there's almost no way that the producers had never heard him sing in real life. They had to know that it wasn't Joe singing the songs. Musicians Vince Johnson and Danny Clinton from the state of Washington claim that they're the real voices behind the songs. Joe didn't write any of the songs, and he didn't even sing any of them. Well, to be fair, a few songs did seem to have his voice mixed in over Vince and Danny's recordings. Joe discovered Vince and Danny after he had put out an ad asking for someone to create a theme song for his reality TV show. It wasn't until Vince and Danny discovered Joe's videos on YouTube that they realized that Joe was taking full credit and just passing himself off as singing the songs. Vince said Joe would set the subjects for the songs and then let him do his own research to come up with the lyrics. But of course, that didn't mean he agreed with Joe's conclusions. Why did Joe Exotic decide to pretend to be the person behind the songs? Joe had even gone as far as saying singing was his passion and his getaway. Well, from what we've seen on Tiger King, his lies for attention fits his narcissistic personality perfectly. And now let's address the Dawn situation. This situation is one giant story in and of itself. Netflix seemed to carefully address Carol's upbringing from childhood and her relationships she's had with Dawn. However, one very pertinent piece of information that was left out by Netflix producers is the fact that Carol actually contends that Dawn was not rich when they had met. Of course, this is a he said, she said situation because clearly everyone that was friends or family with Dawn contends that he had money. Each of Dawn's friends, family members, and associates agree that he had money and came from nothing. And Dawn's family, along with Joe Exotic, said that Carol was only about Dawn's money. Notice how Netflix nor anyone on the show actually mentioned how Dawn made money. They just alluded to that he owned real estate and other assets, but they never go into how he made his millions. Plus, Carol never claimed that Dawn didn't have money. On the Big Cat Rescue Reserve website, she contends that they actually made Dawn's first millions together in real estate after she had met Dawn. Carol contends that Don only owned 2 real estate properties at the time they had met and was worth somewhere in the 6 figures. He didn't start making serious money until one day he happened to be at the bank when he overheard a bank officer talking. The bank officer apparently was saying that he had a $20,000 loan in default that he'd be glad to sell for $2,000. Don eventually got the information and had asked Carol to look into it. Why? Because again, according to Carol, Don couldn't read beyond a first grade level. So as a team, they bought the loan, foreclosed on the property, and sold it for a big profit. And that's how Carol and Don got into the real estate business and made all their money together. They started buying defaulted loans from banks and going to tax deed sales at a time before a lot of people got into the business. Of course, we shouldn't just take Carol's word to be true, but we do know that Netflix conveniently left out her side of the argument. Maybe she never brought it up, but we highly doubt it. Because if it were something she believed, she would definitely have told the producers the whole story. And she 100% would say if it were a lie. That way, she can clear any motives to have him disappear. But of course, all this can easily be cleared up with the property records. By leaving out the part that Carol had equal rights to the properties they bought together, it seriously undermines any motive that Carol would have to want to make Don disappear. So of course, Netflix decided to make the story that much more salacious. By not putting Carol's version of Don's wealth in Tiger King, they can play up Joe Exotic's crazy theory of Carol feeding Don to her tigers. What was the real reason Don was going to Costa Rica? What's the most logical reason he was burying things? Find out more in part 2. Watch this next video to find out about why one of the biggest banks in the world decided to launder dirty money.